Welcome to JW Audio Stories. This is a channel dedicated to creative fictional writing that incorporates the scriptural beliefs and way of life of Jehovah's Witnesses. While the stories are mainly for Jehovah's Witnesses, my hope is that all who come to these audio stories enjoy them. This channel is meant to be uplifting to listeners. The Bible holds out a positive, beautiful hope for humanity and wise counsel for life struggles. My desire is to promote those values. JW Audio Stories is based on my own original creative writing. The written stories can be found on my blog, Writing in Paradise at WordPress. I hope you enjoy. Peace be with you. Welcome to my story. Path to Paradise is a Back to the Future type faith-based story series. The central characters are Bum and Rudy. Bum is an old homeless man who scrounges for food in a dumpster behind Del Vecchio's old world restaurant. He makes his home in an abandoned train station. Rudy Delgado is a Bible historian who lives 100 years in the future earthly paradise prophesied in the scriptures. The two men get caught in a time slip. Rudy is transported back into the period of the last days, and Bum comes forward into a paradise earth. Follow them as they navigate two very different worlds. Each man return to his proper time period before God's great final war? Psalms 37, 9, 10, 11, and 29 reads, "For evil men will be done away with, but those hoping in Jehovah will possess the earth. Just a little while longer, and the wicked will be no more. You will look at where they were, and they will not be there. But the meek will possess the earth, and they will find their exquisite delight in the abundance of peace. The righteous will possess the earth, and they will live forever on it." Glory, like the sandwiches best of all. Bum picked through the garbage dumpster sitting under the fire escape at Del Vecchio's Old World Italian restaurant. Cold morning spring air cut like knives at his gums where he lacked two front teeth. A shudder rumbled through his stick frame. Despite the dry freeze, he continued his search. Glory was waiting. He pushed his thumb through the stubborn knot at the throat of a black garbage bag and pulled down. When the aperture was big enough, Bum shoved his eye to the hole to survey the content. Not one sandwich came into view. He pulled his face away and then took both hands and tore the front. Rot wafted up. The vomit smell of decaying food punched at his face, stinging his eyes. He squeezed them shut for a moment and then continued pushing his arm further into the innards of the bag until his fingers closed around something squishy. Bum pulled his arm out of the bag. He frowned at his extraction. His soot-colored hand clutched a wilted brown lettuce head. He tossed the head over his shoulder. It bounced and rolled under the noses of two mud-matted strays who sniffed around Bum's shopping cart. The dogs ignored the food. They whined for meat or bone. The bigger black dog approached the dumpster. He stood on his back legs and placed his front ones on the blue-grimed garbage bin and barked. The other smaller brown dog yelped and turned circles. He sat with one paw off the ground and wagged his dirty stubbed tail at a furious beat. He ran a tongue over his chops. Bum moved on to another bag. He hoped the big black man who took the garbage to the dumpster put the plastic-wrapped sandwiches in the next bag. What a find to bring back to Glory, who always waited at the train station. A faint smile curved his flake-chapped lips. In his mind, Bum saw her gentle blue eyes widen in surprise. He felt the brush of her lips against his cheek. She'd warmed the sandwiches in the oven behind the coffee counter. Afterward, they would dine on the sandwiches the rest of the morning while sipping on hot black coffee. Bum forced his arm into the bag again. The sleeve on his thin brown wool coat bunched up around his shoulder. When his arm would go no further, he pulled back up with a grunt. Again, no sandwich, only 2 tomatoes and a chunk of meat with a dangling piece of fat crowded his palm. Bum put the piece of meat to his nose and then immediately pushed it away. He pitched the 2 items over the side of the dumpster. The tomatoes hit the ground with a splat. Juice and seed entrails ran over the clumps of food and smashed remnants of styrofoam bits around the dumpster. The seeds, in slimy gel sacks, oozed onto wrinkled dirt-worn page of the Detroit Free Press that lay under Bum's shopping cart. The newspaper shouted the death of a renowned scientist. The headline shouted, "Physicist Dr. Fazey lay dead at 95. The meat landed a few feet away from the garbage bin. Both dogs charged after it. They pounced on their prize at the same time, the black dog on one end and the smaller one on the other. A rabid tug-of-war with a chunk of meat commenced, amid loud snarling and growling. The bigger dog wrenched his head side to side. The little dog held his own. He swung with the meat each time the bigger dog tried to twist it away. Bum wiped his brow. Blasted sandwiches, he swore. He tore another bag. More refuse spilled out. Styrofoam containers filled with food that restaurant patrons forgot to take home. Leftovers scraped from plates. Bits of meat, peas, mashed potatoes, rolls, beer bottles, pop bottles, all tumbled out of the gaping tear just below the tight knot. Bum heaved the rubbish over the side. The glass beverage bottles landed on the ground with a dull clank. One bottle broke and shards spun all over the ice-glazed ground. There had to be a plastic-wrapped sandwich somewhere. Glory was waiting. All the loud commotion summoned the black dog back to Bum. The canine's ears pointed forward. His quivering nose took in all the smells the cold air held. His smaller brown foe scampered away with a chunk of meat in his mouth. Bum threw a styrofoam container over the side. It landed open at the dog's feet. The dog wagged his tail and plunged in with greed, licking up meat, broccoli, and part of a baked potato. Bum yanked the next bag by the neck and ripped it open. He scooped out the insides. He stopped every so often to sort through the straggle of garbage on top of the other bags. Still, no sandwich. He grabbed another bag, and another, and another. With each one, he tore into the interior. His frustration spiked. He hurled the guts of each vessel out of the dumpster with a spiteful frenzy until his brow beaded with dirty sweat. Finally, Bum tired, he acquiesced and sank down on top of the second layer of knotted black bags. In one hand he held an empty, ragged bag. He tossed it up into the air and then watched as it floated gracefully down back beside him. Bum wiped his forehead with his sleeve of his coat and sighed. No sandwiches for Glory. The sound of dogs barking in the back alley of Del Vecchio's brought a smile to Chester's dark face. The Bum was back. He hadn't been around in a week or so. Chester wiped his wet hands on the long white food-stained apron he wore tied around his girth. Ugh, that idiot Bum is back, and those dogs, Chester's work companion Ulla complained. Oh, come now, Ulla. Don't be so hard on the guy. He's probably an unfortunate soul that got kicked out of one of those assisted living homes that's been shut down, Chester chided. Ulla plunged her meaty hands to hot, soapy dishwater and came up with a white plate. She began a hard scrub with the rough side of her sponge. Or maybe he's a bum druggie who everybody got sick of, and now he lives behind the restaurant with those flea-bitten dogs you always feed. Chester gave the spaghetti sauce a stir and then began cutting up some fresh oregano. The times are wicked on folks. No harm in throwing a little kindness here and there to people. Like the good book says, treat others. Ulla made a face. None of your preaching. Bible, 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 Bible. That's all you ever talk about. Listen, I know you leave the leftover sandwiches at the top of the garbage bag for him. That's why we can't get rid of the idiot. So last night, when I threw the garbage out, I made sure the sandwiches were in a bag that ended up deeper in the dumpster. It's not our job to feed all the strays, animal or human. Chester frowned. Ulla continued dunking plates into the hot water. Her hands came up red and her fingers swelled to the size of sausages. Don't think Queen Dee would like that if she heard about it, she added. You'd really snitch on me? Chester asked. In an imitation of Queen Dee, Ulla pulled her nose up and stretched her neck, then put a pudgy hand on her wide hip. Water and suds fell to the floor in big drops. She was a heavy-set woman with purple hair styled in a bob cut. Parts of her generous frame billowed out of her work uniform like someone squeezing a marshmallow. A long black apron tied at the back of her thick neck and again around her midsection held the excesses of her body in place. The over-imitation of the tall, elegant Carlotta del Vecchio Sherman by an ample-figured Ulla elicited a laugh from Chester. Chester, how many times do I tell you not to feed the animal? Now that was perfect, he said, and shook his head. Ulla turned her attention back to the white plates. Uppity woman. Every time she comes in here, she finds something to complain about. Ulla, what did you use to wash the tablecloth? They look not white. Oh, no, people will think this is a sucia place. Really? The woman can't even use the English word for dirty, she sneered. Chester made his way over to the refrigerator and retrieved a couple of eggs and a slice of pancetta. He had been saving for the Bum for a couple days. Well, she does own the place, and Queen Dee ain't all that bad. I don't think she ever got over the death of her husband, is all. She was different when he was alive, softer, kind even. Anthony Del Vecchio, though, now he was one nice man. Mr. D hired me way back in the day. I started out bussing tables and washing dishes after school and on the weekends. Ulla remained unimpressed with Chester's defense of Queen Dee. Well, that may have been back then. Right now, the woman is a piece of work. Didn't think she could get any snootier, and then she married Mr. Sherman, and the snobbishness went to a whole new level. Guess that's what marrying money into money does. Must be nice to be chauffeured around in expensive cars. Chester cracked the eggs on the warm cast iron frying pan that always sat on the stove next to the stock pot. He shot a glance out of the window just above the large stainless steel sink where Ulla stood when she washed dishes. She had moved over at pace to rinse the place off with the sink hose and didn't see the top of Bum's capped head. "Hey, how about you put a pot of coffee on for us?" Chester suggested. "Only if you scramble some of those eggs for me," Ulla said. "Sure, we got plenty." Ulla crossed the kitchen and began preparing the coffee maker. The smell of eggs, butter, and a slice of ham soon intertwined with the aroma of spaghetti sauce. "Where'd you get the ham?" she asked. "It was some extra, too little to make part of a meal, and I felt bad throwing it out." "Well, I want that slice," she said. Chester gave a casual shrug, but had to stomp on the disappointed expression running all over his face. No ham for Bum." "Sure, Ulla, you can have the slice." She narrowed her eyes at him, then shoved the coffee canister back in its place. "I want the good coffee, the coffee we use for weddings. Where's that stuff Queen Dee buys directly from her village in Colombia?" Ulla began nosing around the cabinet. Chester shook his head and held out a protesting hand. "Now, Ulla, that's not right. She don't mind if we have a plate of food when we workin', but coffee from her hometown, you know how she feel about that coffee. Weddings and holidays only." Ulla threw her hands up at him. "I only want a couple of scoops for 2 cups. Besides, you feed that dirty man outside in the dumpster and those dogs, and yeah, I notice him by the way outside the window in the garbage where he belongs. The Bum just gets stuff people don't want to buy and we throw out anyways. The dogs get scraps from what's left over on people's plates," Chester said. Ulla continued her loud rummage through the cabinets and shelves. "I won't tell about your Bum and dogs if you don't tell about 2 scoops of coffee. I doubt she'll even notice." Chester shook his head. "Well, Jehovah sees." She screwed up her face as if she had a mouthful of sour milk. "Jehovah sees," she mimicked him. "Be quiet about your Jehovah." "Well, I don't want none of that coffee." Ulla shrugged. "Fine by me. I will enjoy this by myself. Just keep your trap shut. Oh, and I like cheese over my scrambled eggs." "I'm telling you, Ulla, she's gonna notice." Ulla, despite her heaviness, managed her way down on her knees so she could look through the lowest shelves. "You know what, Chester? I think your Jehovah would love this coffee. How could he blame me?" She poked her head into a lower cabinet and moved the content inside around. "Ulla, you're stealing," he said. "Stealing? After all the work we have to do around here? I think we deserve a little of the best she offers her patrons." Chester continued stirring the spaghetti sauce. He shook his head. Ulla reached further into the cabinet until only her heart-shaped bottom showed. The items she moved scraped the floor of the cabinet. "This ain't right at all," Chester said under his breath. "Aha! Found it." Ulla's voice was full of glee. She pulled out the cabinet, clutching a silver-colored canister to her bosom. "Come to Mama." Ulla started the coffee to brew and then pointed the remote at a small TV sitting atop the refrigerator. She and Chester listened as they continued their morning duties. Channel 15 anchors Thomasina Sawyer and Wallace Concrete took up the screen. They sat side by side like 2 ice puddles in frigid Michigan weather, hard and glittery on the surface, but the news they dished sat like sludge in dirt water beneath them. Thomasina was a thin woman past middle age. She spoke in a nasal-toned voice tinged with a British accent. Her teased platinum bouffant hair loomed high like cotton candy. A black ribbon divided the mass of hair from a thick sideband that curled at her temple. Co-anchor Wallace Concrete was every bit his name, a slab of cement, a blot of gray. His suit was gray, his hair was gray, even his eyes were that same color, only with flecks of blue in them. At least this gave him a bit of shine, so that he had some life gleaming through his dull, monotone exterior. He had the tendency to squint at the camera and so looked as if he was searching for something in the distance. When the broadcast music faded, Wallace commenced with the first news story. Good morning. We start this morning's broadcast with unfortunate news. Detroit native and renowned physicist Dr. Fay C. Lee passed away in the early morning hours. At the end of the broadcast, Thomasina will have a tribute to Dr. Lee's extraordinary life. He then turned to Thomasina and she continued, Yes, thank you, Wallace. 30 years ago, I had the great privilege of interviewing Dr. Lee. Little did I know what a defining moment that would be. I encourage our viewers to stay tuned for a peek back at that interview. Thank you, Thomasina. Can't wait to see that report. Meanwhile, in other news, a local jewelry store was broken into. Security cameras show the perpetrators drive a truck through the storefront window. Channel 15's own J.C. Barron is on the scene with Alan Lusan, owner of Lusan's Jewelry. J.C., tell us what you know so far. Young J.C. appeared on the TV screen. She was encased in a puffy black down coat. A thick red wool cap was pulled firmly over her head. A pair of glassy eyes peered from a small face stained with red, wind-whipped cheeks. Yes, thank you, Wallace. The robbery happened around 2 a.m. The robbers made off with about $30,000 in jewelry. I am standing here with Alan Lusan, the owner. Please, Mr. Lusan, tell us what happened. J.C. shoved the microphone at him. What happened? What do you mean, what happened? My store got robbed. He gave J.C. an incredulous look and gestured to his crushed-in storefront window. Yes, Mr. Lusan. Is there anything else you can tell us? The store owner eyed her with dark, bulging eyes, flashing with anger. He crossed two long, ropey arms to his chest. Yeah, I got something to say. Whoever did this, you're a coward. Look at that. He gestured again to his storefront window. That's going to cost a pretty penny and slow my business down for a few weeks. Are you happy, whoever did this? J.C. took the microphone back and then smiled. Mr. Lusan disappeared from view. There you heard it from Alan Lusan. Thomasina furrowed her brow. And do police have any idea who may have done this? She asked. Police are still going through the security videos. They ask if anyone has information to please call 1-800 the Detroit Police. The department would appreciate any assistance in this matter, J.C. responded. Well, let's hope they find whoever is responsible, came Wallace's baritone voice. Thomasina, her forehead still furrowed, looked into the camera. She shook her head. Such a shame. It's all hope for a positive outcome. Thank you for that story, J.C. Maybe someone out there will come forward with information to help police. She tissed and then smiled. She segued into the next story. In other news, Stoll Steel has laid off 1,500 workers. Channel 15 has tried to reach out to Bierce Stoll, CEO of Stoll Steel, for comment. So far, nobody from their offices has responded. Wallace chimed in. The city can't seem to catch a break. Stoll Steel employs many of the city residents. How will some deal with the loss of employment and the ongoing water crisis in Detroit? Lots of people have had their water shut off until the city's $5 million water bill is paid. I know so many residents in such dire situations, Thomasina said. Wallace continued with the rest of the story. City officials are still engaged in ongoing talks with the Detroit Water and Sewage Company in the hopes of finding a solution to this problem. On a positive note, the United Nations has become involved in this most pressing issue since it is regarded as a humanitarian problem. Access to water and adequate housing is a basic human right, he said. A quote on the screen from the UN flashed. It said, "The city of Detroit must restore access to water for its citizens who remain unable to pay their bills," two United Nations experts urged today, adding that a failure to do so would be a violation of the most basic human rights of these residents. Thomasina gave her viewing audience a sugary smile. Her voice spiked. "Well, that is very positive news. Is there any chance the UN might get involved with the city of Flint where there is still lead in the water?" Wallace shook his gray head. "As of yet, there is no comment. The governor's office advises Flint residents to continue boiling or buy their water." The two anchors continued their delivery of one dismal story after another. A newborn baby wrapped in newspaper was found in an abandoned, burned-out home. The banks foreclosed on more homes. A dead body was found in the old vacant train station in Corktown. An old gentleman with Alzheimer's who had gotten out of his daughter's house a couple days before was still missing. The broadcast cut to an interview JC had done the day prior with the man's desperate daughter. JC stood with a disheveled woman in front of a snow-topped home. "And how are you feeling?" JC asked. She shoved a microphone to the woman's face. The woman wrung her hands and turned a gaunt, pale countenance to the camera. Her voice wavered as she spoke. "My family is desperate. Please, if anyone has seen my father, please contact my family through the police department. He is 80 years old and has other health issues besides Alzheimer's. We are so worried. He is only wearing sweatpants and a red t-shirt in these freezing temperatures. We hope he hasn't fallen into the wrong hands. If he has, whoever you are, please return my father. He has a family who loves him. We miss him." The lady sobbed and put her hands over her face. A picture of the elderly man flashed across the TV screen. JC took over. "If anyone has seen or has any information about 80-year-old Glenn Hopkins, please call the 1-800 Detroit Police. There is a $1,000 reward for his safe return." This is JC Barron with Channel 15 News. The camera shifted back to Thomasina and Wallace sitting side by side. "Well, let's hope the best for Glenn," Thomasina said. "And now let's go to Channel 15's Bill Dare for a report on the weather. Bill, when are we going to have a let up on these freezing temperatures?" Wallace wanted to know. The camera cut to lanky Bill Dare in front of a map of mitten-shaped Michigan. "Unfortunately, these frigid temperatures won't be letting up anytime soon. We will be dealing with teen and sub-zero temperatures all week." Bill gestured to the mitten map and called out freezing temperatures as if he were doing a roll call. "Mother Nature is handing the metro area a beating. Detroit 20 degrees, Pontiac 19, Bloomfield Hills area 19, Royal Oak 18, and Clawson 18. Thomasina crossed her arms and rubbed them. "Oh, brr, guess that means find a cuddle buddy," she said. "Definitely stay inside if you don't have to go out." Channel 15's weather Doppler is also tracking a snowstorm which, for now, seems to be headed for the lower peninsula. Wallace gave a rare stiff smile. "Oh, another storm coming our way," he said. An aerial view of Michigan came up on the TV screen. Bill Dare waved his hand over an area that burgeoned with twisting wind and swirling snow. "From the looks of it, this storm seems to be headed towards Traverse City and Petoskey area. We'll have to keep on the lookout. Hopefully it'll die out before making its way to the metro area," he explained. "Oh, let's definitely hope for that outcome," Thomasina said. The camera panned over to Wallace. "Channel 15 will keep the metro area informed with the most up-to-date information on the potential snowstorm. Now on to more positive news. Thomasina, tell us about the new sports center that will be going up." Thomasina's eyes widened and her voice rose to squeal like brakes on a car. "Yes, some welcome news.
Channel 15 has just learned that $20 million has been raised for the proposed sport complex. A number of larger companies have combined resources to fund the center. Wallace came to life as if someone flipped the light switch in a dark room to on. His demeanor thawed, and he gave Thomasina a genuine smile. Well, this is certainly good news. Do we know who the donors are? So far, there are 3. Speedy Loans, Detroit Global Bank, and even Stoll Steel. Thomasina answered. Excitement bubbled through her polished exterior. Well, this will certainly be a boost for the economy here in Detroit as well as Michigan, Wallace said. Thomasina nodded. It most certainly will. The plan is to house Detroit sports teams in one spectacular complex. Each sport will have their own separate area along with administrative space for each. Wallace's cheeks flooded with color. This is an ambitious undertaking. Any ideas as to where they are thinking of putting the complex? This will be a massive structure. Wallace sounded breathless. He curled the top of a piece of paper around one of his fingers. Well, I had an opportunity to speak with a source in Speedy Loans Mortgage, and there are a couple possibilities. The Old Hope Hospital and the assisted living centers they operated. The hospital and centers would have to be knocked down and clear the land for the complex, and also the abandoned train station in Corktown. Wallace took in the information as if he were eating the tastiest meal. Both places are excellent candidates, he said. Thomasina looked back into the camera. Of course, all of us here at Channel 15 will keep our viewers informed of the most up-to-date news on the sporting complex, she assured her audience. She grinned wide as the broadcast music rose in the background and then faded to commercial.